Well, ladies, gentlemen, everyone in between, the time has come once again to take a peek at 6 new twisted tales from the Number 9 lads. But this time, we've come to the end. It's the final series of the show, and it's come an awful long way from its initial 6 episodes over a decade ago. As always, I'm both excited and afraid for what's going to happen. At the very least, we can take this little journey together as we once more step inside Number 9. Say you were to describe Inside Number 9 to someone who's never seen the show but wants to check it out. What would you say to them? Would you describe it as a show that's basically Black Mirror but without a technology? Or maybe go more in depth on how it's a wide array of drama, comedy, horror, and everything in between, when the show's 2 creators always write and appear in each episode and one major twist at the end? Or maybe, just maybe, people know it as the one show he's obsessed over and you might check it out. That's the answer I usually get. Well, irregardless of however you start, Inside Number 9 itself has always been defined by these points of drama, comedy, and horror, and this episode, The Trolley Problem, is no exception. In this episode, we primarily focus on 2 characters, Drew, a down-on-his-luck stranger played by Shearsmith, and Blake, a therapist in the countryside played by Pemberton. After Blake finds Drew soaked and alone on a bridge wanting to jump off of it, he takes him in for the night to give him some comfort, as the 2 men bond and analyze each other. But as time ticks on forward during the night, secrets between the 2 men get revealed, as we find out why Drew was near that bridge, and why he's got a gun on him. The main draw of this episode, at least from the outset from what its title promises, is its references and use of the subject of psychology and psychotherapy, which is always quite the fun and unique topic in a show, especially in one such as Inside Number 9. With only 30 minutes to spare for each character, we often get a good glimpse in this show into who they are, why they're this way, and their overall rationale in just 30 minutes, and this episode is no exception. Drew and Blake each have their own rationale for their lives, and seeing as how this episode is a 2-hander, having just the 2 of them nip at each other's heels throughout the course of the episode is entirely fascinating. And of course, Pemberton and Shearsmith give phenomenal performances as ever.
Say it's important to have safeguarding measures in place.
I never consented to these recordings. This is a violation of my privacy.
Shut the fuck up!
I also want to give special mention to how the episode looks. Having an episode being mostly set in a kitchen of all things, I really have to commend the lighting of each scene. Dark shadows and dismal greys all come together to create an almost ethereal picture, and especially once we step outside into the storm, the shadows and blues really comes into play, which further drives the feeling of uncertainty and danger throughout the episode. Whenever we hear Inside Number 9, get it because that's what the show's called, it certainly has this off-putting colour, almost like some molding environment in a jar, contrasted with the raging wet storm outside. The characters are quite unique cases as well. Firstly, we have Drew, who we think is a man on the bridge of killing himself, but in actuality is here for Blake instead, dropping his otherwise meek and nervous persona halfway through the episode into something more commanding and vengeful, especially with his greater plot in mind. The fact that he uses the psychology of the trolley problem dilemma against Blake in his actions is quite interesting, as he constantly urges Blake to try and do the right thing, even if it throws himself into the tracks. It all has to relate to the trolley problem, something Blake understands well and both men can easily wrap their head around. Even if it's something like Drew's daughter overdosing, even if it's not something that really fits in, Drew twists it into something that does, just to further entertain Blake. And then there's the man of the hour himself, Blake. Blake always wants to be seen as someone with power. While not exactly saying such stuff out loud, it is definitely implied with how he presents himself as knowledgeable and trying to be in charge of the conversation. There's the fact that he hit that his diploma was from Mook Cambridge instead of the more prestigious school, and obviously his more egregious play of being romantically involved with one of his patients. He's always trying to assert himself as someone powerful and in charge, ranging from his conversations between him and Drew at the table, to his more extreme methods of tying up loose ends to not harm his reputation later in the episode's story.
I have my son to think about. Now get on your knees.
Oh, please, Mr. Chambers.
On your knees.
If you kill me here now, there'll still be a police investigation.
I should have let you jump off that bridge when I had the chance.
And speaking of this episode's story, that's kind of where my main fault with the episode lies. Now, normally the stories in this show are tight, concise, and thrilling, and I'm not saying that the trolley problem isn't. It's a decent little revenge story, plus a 2-hander to boot. So, what exactly is the problem? Well, we've been here before. Inside Number 9, I feel, always uses tropes and cliches to its advantages, but here in this episode, it's almost as if the cliches dictate the episode rather than the other way around. I like how the overall plot can just be described as two orphan men trying to do what's best in the belief that they're right, but I, among many others, can't help but see resemblances in this episode to earlier ones. Misdirection, The Last Weekend, The Riddle of the Sphinx, they all do what the Trolley problem does, and exceptionally, but unfortunately due to circumstance and previous experience, I can't really think of this episode in the same way. But for all its flaws, I certainly wouldn't say the Trolley problem is a bad episode. An underwhelming one, sure, but certainly not bad. It has its moments, and of course the acting and direction is stellar as always, but for such an otherwise unique theme hovering around it, the fact that its plot to me is so middling is quite a disappointment. If it ends up being your favourite of the series, all power to you, but for me personally, I just feel there are other episodes out there that ate this one's lunch.